Hey, hello everybody. Happy Friday. We are live. We are here. Today's topic is how to eat more plants with SIBO and IBS, which for many can seem like an oxymoron. Yes, Delia?
Absolutely. And probably the top thing that we hear, that people want to eat the plants and feel like there are so many gassy foods out there. There are so many foods that they don't tolerate. And that is our specialty. That is what we love doing. And that is what we love supporting people in.
So welcome everybody. I'm James Marin, integrative registered dietitian, environmental nutritionist.
I'm Delia Marin, registered dietitian, nutritionist.
And we are the owners and founders of Married to Health. It's an integrative registered dietitian practice. And we're here, we're live just to talk about these very, very important topics as they relate to gut health. If you haven't seen some of our previous topics, you can go back on Facebook and YouTube and watch them. For our Good Gut members in our Facebook group, you get to ask questions live. You are seeing this live and get to ask questions. So that's great. So welcome to all of you. We're so happy to be here. It's like kicking off the weekend every other Friday in a very positive, healthy way. You get to ask questions. Hopefully you learn something that's useful to you. And today we want to really clear up some context. Hopefully we won't be live for like 2 hours, because we could definitely talk 2 hours on this topic, but we want to clear up, important context as it relates to, maybe your gastroenterologist or your primary doctor or even another dietitian who's told you, stay away from FODMAPs, don't eat fiber, don't eat grains, don't eat legumes, the list can go on and on, right? And essentially a lot of these, and pretty much all of these, are plant foods. And again, fiber is going to just wreak havoc on you. The lectins are going to wreak havoc, oxalates, again, the list can go on and on. So we want to put some context, because our approach is helping you eat more plant foods.
Not just eat them.
Right.
Our approach and our mission and our goal and what keeps us going is helping you tolerate the plants.
Yes.
It's not just about eating them. We know that many people eat plants and then they don't feel well afterwards. So it's so important to try to figure out why that is, right, why that might be happening, and then how to tiptoe into adding more plants to your diet so that way your gut can acclimate, and that way it starts to accept a wider variety of these plant foods, even some of these FODMAPs. And so one of the things I think that we want to talk about is, what is a FODMAP?
Yes.
This might be a word that you've heard before. I think it's becoming more popular, and honestly, it's almost becoming kind of like a faddish diet that people are doing. I think
you guys doing the low FODMAP diet?
Yeah, I've heard people do that, and I'll ask, I've had patients say, oh, I was told to go on a low FODMAP diet, and I'll ask, do you get bloated after eating certain things? Do you have gut issues? And they're like, no. My provider just told me I should try this. I've had patients tell me that their provider told them to try it for fertility, for weight loss. Let's clear things up. A low FODMAP diet means that it's low in foods that are fermentable. So there are different fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. Mm-hmm. So basically, they are different fermentable fibers, sugars, and starches in these FODMAP groups. We'll talk about specific foods that might be different types of FODMAPs. But this was a way of eating that was developed by Monash University out of Australia. Mm-hmm. And they really did a lot of research on it. They found that those with gut issues, a lot of times those with slow motility or movement, those with hypersensitivity in their gut, those with IBS, those with SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, IMO, intestinal microbial overgrowth, certain people found that they were more reactive to these fermentable foods. So these fermentable sugars, these fermentable fibers, these fermentable starches. And so with the low FODMAP diet, they're recommending to try to avoid. So there are different phases of a low FODMAP diet. You have the avoidance phase. You have so it's complete restriction. And then you have slow introduction and reintroduction, and a phase where you're trying to identify which of the FODMAP groups might you react to. Mm-hmm. There are different types of FODMAPs. So foods that are high in fructose. Fructose is a fruit sugar. So fructose is one type of FODMAP. Then you have lactose. Lactose, as we know, is dairy sugar. So any type of milk sugar that is fermentable. Then you have oligosaccharides. So these are long chains of different compounds like fructans or galactans. And some of these might be things like beans. Certain fruits are fructans and galactans. We know certain grains, especially gluten-containing grains, and then certain vegetables, which again are higher in fiber and have more of a fermentable nature. And then you have things called polyols as well. So things that are polyols, different vegetables, different fruits, and different artificial sweeteners and different types of sweeteners as well.
Yes. And so all that to encapsulate and say there's much context needed here, because to say completely avoid and eliminate these foods, and a lot of times, a lot of the context is missed, even that is coming from Monash University, where now it's time to reintroduce these foods. We have patients and clients and many of you out there, the population, who are like, well, I'm just going to avoid these foods forever. Or if not working with a proper care team and doing things correctly, you avoid, and then your body gets used to avoiding. And when you try to reintroduce too quickly, you run into a lot of issues. So you continue to avoid and then avoid more and more and more. Yes. All the while, we have to give the context that there's a reason why these foods are fermentable. There's a reason why you're getting these oligosaccharides that are complex carbohydrates. They are there to feed your microbes. And if you do have microbial overgrowth, or you do have dysbiosis where your microbiota is out of whack and imbalanced, then these fermentable foods are going to ferment in places they shouldn't and cause you discomfort and symptoms, right? So context matters. Now, the bigger question isn't to say, how do I avoid these foods? It's, why do I have this dysbiosis? Why do I have SIBO, right? Or why do I have IBS? And then the next is, how do I reintroduce these foods in a proper way? And so first things first, I like to say it is working at an individual basis. This is general information. This is not medical advice. This is not tailored to you. It has to be tailored to you. We have to understand the, again, context of you, just like we're giving context on this topic. And it's important to fully understand you, right? It's important to understand your health and work with your care team. Now,
and that I think is so important. I think not only understanding you, but understanding your limitations and understanding that it does take a team. And we did a video on this last time. If you haven't seen it, we recommend going back and watching it. We talked about different members of the care team. We're going to bring in their different specialties to help you figure out why this is happening, help you figure out your root. We mentioned things like a gastroenterologist, a physical therapist, if you might be having pelvic floor issues, a therapist or a mental health counselor. We talked about a dietitian. And so the team can be quite robust because it might be multifactorial. It might need intervention from all of those people to help you kind of come to your why and help you understand why you might be reacting to certain foods. So I have so many patients who say, I researched this online, like I thought to do this, you know, even low FODMAP, because Monash does say, you know, going on the strict elimination phase, really you don't want to be there. 8 weeks is what they recommend, but really 12 weeks is kind of the max that they recommend. And you don't want to be avoiding foods, especially if you're not even sure, you're not to that point yet, not 12 months. So you want to really get to that challenge phase of it. So that strict elimination, once you're done with that, you want to start the next phase, the challenge phase and the reintroduction phase. So you can identify that even if you are having reactions to some of these foods, and that you very well may be, you probably are not reacting to all FODMAPs. So to blanket them and say, I'm just going to go at this, I'm going to be low FODMAP. And we have had patients, I've had patients come to me saying, I've been low FODMAP, and from there it only got more restrictive. And now I'm to the point where I eat 5 foods only, or I can only tolerate 3 things. And even I really want to eat more foods, but I can't now. And again, there might be a lot involved there. There might be some, you know, some mental capacity that we want to bring in. We might want to bring in mental health team where maybe there is a little bit of trauma and disordered eating there. We might want to say, why are you having slowed motility? Let's try to figure that out. Why is this happening? What's going on at its root? Let's really figure this out, because a healthy gut is a diverse gut.
Yes. And so this could be overwhelming. This is maybe new information. That's why there's a lot to this. So we urge you all to learn more and work with your care team or work with a knowledgeable dietitian like ourselves. And you can link more information to that below. I like to give this analogy right now because analogies help me. I love analogies. So imagine you're in debt. You're in credit card debt. You're in student loan debt. You're bought a house you can't afford. Let's say you're in massive amounts of debt. Okay, that's not fun. It doesn't feel good. It's stressful, right? This can be similar to your gut health. You're in gut health debt, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what we're doing right now in a lot of ways is saying, oh, you're in debt. We're going to help you. Okay, this is not us. This is a typical general approach, right? You're in debt. Okay, great. Come to us. We're going to help you. Okay, let's look at all your debt. Give me all your bills, all the letters that are coming, those phone calls that are coming. Maybe they're even sending emails and text messages. Okay, let me see all that. Okay, I'm going to delete. We're going to take some time and delete all these. Show me where they're coming. Okay, delete, delete, delete. Rip up the letters, throw them away. There you go. Your problem, your debt problem is solved. You don't have to deal with it. Your symptoms are gone. Right? We're focusing on the symptoms. Oh, you don't like getting those credit card bills in the mail? Now it's gone because we ripped them up and throw them away. Better yet, I have a service that'll come and check your mail, take them out so you don't even have to see them, and we rip them up and throw them away for you, and you just don't see them. Is that actually solving your debt? No. Many of the GI approaches when it's coming to SIBO and IBS is that of symptom care, where we're really fixated on these symptoms, i.e. the emails, texts, letters from the debt collectors, and we're saying we're going to get rid of that, as opposed to saying, hey, you know what? This is a lot harder. This is going to be more time consuming, but we're going to actually work with you and develop a plan to help pay off your debt. And better yet, not only just pay off your debt, but make sure you never get in debt again. That is a lot more difficult to do. It's very tailored because everyone has different debt. But how fulfilling is it to actually get out of debt and then not be in debt ever again in your life? That is what you want. That is what we want for you with SIBO and IBS. And that is the important context. Is what you're doing fixing the actual root problem, or is it fixing the symptoms, right? Is what you're doing actually going to pay off your debt and make sure you're never back in debt, or is it just ripping up the mail? So you have to, it's important to get that context. What we know from research, what we know from long-term, we're talking 60 plus year epidemiological studies, what we know from in vitro, in vivo, cross-sectional, you name it, all different types of studies is diversity in plant foods matters for your health. It matters for the diverse population in your gut microbiota. It matters even in your oral microbiome, your esophageal microbiome, all the way down to your colon where we ferment. When you're eating a diverse array of plant foods, you are creating chemical byproducts that are positive and beneficial for your body. Mm-hmm. Now, the question is, if that is hurting you, well, I can't eat those beans and I can't eat those potatoes. There's important context that we work with our patients on is, well, you're eating maybe just a russet potato, right? What about a purple potato? What about a red potato? What about a yellow potato? So we have an approach that's called sidestepping, where we not only just say, okay, you're eating potato and say, oh, all potatoes are the same. It's a blanket term. I eat potatoes. There's 600 different types of potatoes, right? So there's ways to eat a different variety of potato that maybe doesn't do as much symptomatic harm to your body, and you're still eating potato. So there's a lot we can dive into here. I don't know if you want to add anything before I keep going.
And I love that analogy, and it makes sense. And I think when people come to us very overwhelmed, they say, but I've been in debt for 50 years.
Right.
How are you even going to help me get out of this? And not only that, not only get out of my debt, start saving, right?
Yeah, and save for retirement.
And it, like James said, it can take hard work. So it's really important to understand what it can take and understand that starting somewhere is the best place to be, right? Because that might sound overwhelming. Maybe you're saying, I can't afford to see all those different practitioners. I mentally can't take that on right now. I just don't have the capacity or the bandwidth. I don't have the time to go to these different appointments. Start somewhere. And then when you're ready to move further than that, do that at that time. And if you don't feel like your care team really understands that or supports that, you're not with the right care team. And It's totally up to you. Some people are fine with continuing to rip up bills and they feel okay about that. I would say overall for long-term health, it's eventually going to make its way elsewhere. Like James said, we have various microbiomes throughout our body. They communicate very readily with one another. And so when it's hitting one, it's absolutely going to make its way to another. So it's so important for you, and it's important for those with whom you cohabitate. We know that there have been new studies that have come out, and even studies from past that have shown that those with whom you live or spend quite a bit of time can also mimic your microbiome. We know that we share DNA with one another. They've done studies actually where they took, family members, and maybe one family member was obese, the other one was of normal weight, and they did FMT, so fecal microbiota transplant, and if from the obese person transplanted into the normal BMI person and vice versa. And guess what? The normal BMI person became more overweight, more obese, and the normal the obese person lost weight. So it can have that much of an effect. We know that we're sharing these microbes with others with whom we live. So we oftentimes tend to say that, oh, IBS runs in my family. Well, we share those microbes. So if I'm someone living in my household with an overabundance of a type of inflammatory microbe in my system, I'm likely to pass that on to my husband and my child with whom I share food, and, these people who we have a more intimate interaction with. So it can be so important. And not only that, these behaviors that we take on, right? Where you might be a parent and you might be restrictively eating in front of your child, and having these IBS symptoms can very often cross into eating disorder behavior or restrictive eating behavior, intentionally or unintentionally. I have many patients who have had past eating disorders, and their symptoms can almost then trigger them to go back into restrictive or highly controlled eating patterns. And children tend to see that, and children will pick up on that and say, oh, okay, those foods might be hurting me as well. And it almost gets into that nocebo effect. We've all heard of placebo, right? Where we think, okay, something's working for me, even though it was maybe a placebo. There was nothing actually there in the intervention, but because you thought positively about it, you had positive outcomes. You can do the same on the other flip side of the coin. There's something called the nocebo effect. You might think that something's going to harm you, and your thoughts become so powerful that it can actually start to cause harm to you. So with food, that can be very powerful. Food is something oftentimes we want to control because it's in our lives, something we can control. A lot of times life can feel out of control. This last year told us that, if nothing more. And so it's really easy to say, it's the food. I blame the food.
Yes. And wonderful points. And to elaborate on some of those, I mean, the idea of it running in the family, I want to touch on some of these myths and maybe misconceptions here of like things running in the family is maybe one. Also anti-nutrients, I eventually want to get to. I hate that term, anti-nutrients. We got to come up with a better term. But what Dolly mentioned is like it runs in the family. I mean, honestly, another analogy for that is if we never swept the floor of our home, I think roaches would run in the family of our home, right? Like roaches we'd be like, oh, that just happens in our home. Well, we never sweep the floor, right? We have all these crumbs and pieces of food. If you're not doing an action, then you are going to get a reaction from that, right? If we never swept our floor, we're going to have little critters and maybe roaches and little mice, right? And then if we teach our daughter, hey, my parents never swept their floor, I'm not going to sweep my floor. You know what? Bugs and roaches and mice, they just run in our family. We've always had that. My grandparents had that. My parents had that. It's like, well, you guys never swept your floor, right? So there's more habits, right? Lifestyle accounts for many of these chronic diseases and these habits that are carried on generation to generation than actual DNA.
Are we discounting the fact that there can be a familial component? Not at all.
No, yes.
There can be an influence there from your genes, but we know that there are really cool things like epigenetics. And so your lifestyle can affect your genes so much more in most situations.
Correct.
Than anything else.
And even a cooler fact and tidbit is that 99% of the DNA in your body is actually microbial DNA. So most of the DNA in your body right now, in or on your body right now, is microbial. It's not human. So this speaks more to that nutrigenomic, proteomic effect, right? So it's
and this
important.
is where then we want to say, okay, when is food speaking to me?
Right.
So we started out, and that's our whole topic today, eating more plant foods. And we can't talk about just the food without talking about what we just talked about.
Important context.
It is important context. So we talked about what FODMAPs were. And again, we want to see how is our microbiome, how is this 99% of our microbial DNA communicating to us with the different foods that we're putting in. So as previously mentioned, maybe your body is not equipped right now to handle a lot of these fermentable foods. Perhaps you have hypersensitivity, visceral hypersensitivity. What does this mean? That even if you feel just slightly distended, for some people, that causes extreme pain and discomfort.
Right.
And again, that could be more psychosomatic. That could be something truly that they are feeling in their nerves. They might have this hypersensitivity. So it's important to understand, why are you having these IBS symptoms? Again, like we said, is it slow motility? I can't even tell you all how often we find out with my patients that at the end of the day, they're extremely constipated. And that's the root of their SIBO. Why are they extremely constipated? We'll try to find out. Again, is there something going on with their muscles in and around their digestive tract? Is there something going on with an inflammatory process internally inside of the digestive tract? Is there something going on metabolically with their endocrine system? So we always try to find out why. And are you constipated? And let's alleviate that. Because as much as these low FODMAP diets or other elimination diets, whether it's SCD diet, autoimmune paleo diet, you name it, right? These are meant to be pretty temporary fixes. You might find that there might be a food in there that you're like, okay, I've introduced all of them, but I still don't tolerate lactose, or I still can't eat pistachios. And that's going to be a FODMAP food that I react to. You know, you want to understand that, like, okay, maybe we're not there yet. Not yet. And that's always a mindset I like to encourage people to take. We're not there yet. Maybe we'll get there. We've gotten there with a lot of these other foods. So on this low FODMAP diet, again, you might be restricting some of these high fructose fruits. Let's give some examples. Might be apples, might be pears, not grapes. It might be some of these, it might be some of these more tropical fruits like mangoes. You might see things, peaches, some of these stone fruits. Those are high in fructose. Okay, so let's temporarily eliminate them. Also, things high in fructose are going to be honey and high fructose corn syrup.
Pears.
So maybe you're going to avoid some of those things, fruit juices, things like that.
Watermelon, one of my favorites. Summer's here. Bummer.
So hopefully not. Again, lactose. So all lactose products, things like yogurt, ice cream, sour cream, dairy milk, soft cheeses, those are high in milk sugar. So you want to be avoiding those as well. Again, some of these fructans and galactans, these aromatic, that's one of James's favorite words, these aromatic
super healthy for you. Very
so healthy for you, right? Onions and garlic, they're amazing. They're antimicrobial, they're fermentable, they're high in sulforaphane, which is an antioxidant. They're high in FODMAP.
All these
yes. So again, if temporarily you're restricting them to try to identify which one you're reacting to, fine. Beans, gluten containing grains, other amazing foods that help you produce more mucus, like okra. Again, a lot of those cruciferous vegetables like Brussels sprouts and broccoli. These are some of the healthiest foods on earth. So if you're doing this temporarily, you're avoiding things like persimmons, you're avoiding some of these other FODMAP foods, you're avoiding mushrooms. Do it temporarily if you feel that that's going to work for you. Work with someone or have a plan to slowly start re-challenging some of them, because it's not called a no FODMAP diet. Even if you are trying to do it, it's called a low FODMAP diet. So slowly you want to start integrating things. And so we've incorporated concepts of this into our, SIBO and IBS approach. So if you need to intertwine that, great. We also want people to kind of identify through a reintroduction and an elimination and reintroduction, what types of foods really are triggering that for you. So which of the FODMAPs is doing that for you, or even which types of grains. So in ours, we take it a step further and we say, let's just do fruits and vegetables at first. Now let's add simple grains back. Now let's add legumes. Now let's add more fat and whole grains, and then ferments and fermented foods. So we try to really help people identify, when did problems come back, and is it actually the food? Because if you go through something like this and you're like, that didn't do anything for me. If you're doing all these different elimination diets, it's probably not the food. And it's so important to look elsewhere.
And we go a little above and beyond where we look at quality. I mean, quality matters in your food. So, what is on your food? What pesticide residues are on your food? Who's touched your food and handled your food? How far has your food traveled? This can be a little overwhelming for some, but if you can take this on, this matters in your food. Unfortunately, food, and again, this topic in this video can be broken up into so many topics, and we'll probably elaborate on this in a separate video. And in 2 weeks, or actually, and the next video is going to be about motility. But the quality matters. So when we're talking about organic or local or going to your farmer's market and really assessing, hey, are you spraying this food? Because we know for a fact pesticide residues can impact your gut microbiota. And so that is very, very important. So, it's important to touch on that.
And it's important to, again, work on getting back that diversity. So say you are in an elimination phase, fine. One thing that I like to ensure with my patients, whether it is SCD or low FODMAP or AIP or whatever it is, I want to make sure that person's eating every single thing that they can be in those different categories, because still there is quite a bit of variety afforded in there.
Yes.
So you want to make sure you're not just repeating the same old thing, right? You're not like, I'm doing pretty unripened bananas and I eat a couple raspberries and I eat some strawberries. Great. Are you eating durian? Do you eat tangelos? Are you eating passion fruit? What about pineapple? Are you eating grapefruits? Have you reintroduced honeydew melon? If you are in one of these more elimination phases, make sure you're not unnecessarily eliminating things, because you're not, again, thoroughly creating that robust diversity of food. So really try to get in that diversity of different fiber that you are going to tolerate. Are you eating bamboo shoots? Are you eating things like water chestnuts? What are, if you can't tolerate the whole onion, are you eating the green part of green onions? Because that should be one that you are tolerating. Do you eat pumpkin? Are you eating, eggplant? Make sure that you are getting in the diversity that you can get in, because your gut is an amazing organ. It is, we have muscles in our gut, and when you don't use it, you lose it. So you want to make sure that your body's always preserving itself, and it's going to say, okay, James is not using these digestive enzymes that are needed to break down these foods. I'm going to preserve some of that energy. Forget that. I'm just not even going to worry about making that anymore. Or again, you're shifting the microbial plane of your gut. So don't let that memory go away. You want to still feed into that and say, okay, I can tolerate these different foods. I'm going to make sure that I'm getting them in. That still applies. If you are on something more of an elimination diet, you want to still say, even though I am eliminating certain foods, I'm still shooting for my 30 plus plants per week. We've mentioned that study before, but there was an incredible study that came out about 3 or 4 years ago now, and it showed that those who consumed 30 plus types of plants per week, so different fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, beans, grains, legumes, had the most robust gut microbiome. This is still achievable on one of these more elimination type diets until you're able to tolerate more. So please don't forget that. Please include as much diversity as you can.
Wow. So great messages. I mean, context matters. Again, going back, finding your care team matters.
Finding your root matters.
Finding your root.
Not always blaming it on the food.
And your why matters. And then making sure you're not on a no FODMAP or drastically reducing. It doesn't mean no diversity. Eat your plant foods. That is important, and you can assimilate more.
And speaking of that, once you are ready to transition and challenge and reintroduce, doing it properly, little by little, so that way you're not jumping into a half a cup of black beans and then saying, I can't eat black beans. Maybe you can't eat that many yet. Start low and slow. Start with a teaspoon and then work your way up, because you might find your threshold. Maybe you can eat a third of a cup, and that's great, because then you're not telling yourself, I can't eat this. It's maybe I don't tolerate that much of that certain food, but it's not a complete no-go, and you're not completely long-term eliminating foods from your diverse microbiome.
Cool. Well, everyone, this is always great. It's always great to just connect with you, be here live with you. If anyone has any comments, put them down below. It's so great. I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Next time we see you, we're going to be talking about motility. Okay, so if you're interested in motility, again, talking about that constipation, rabbit pellets, as we like to call them, where you're not emptying completely. If that is you, we're going to be talking about motility next time. So make sure you're subscribed, make sure you're following, comment, like, and thank you all for joining us.
We love talking all things guts and butts with you next week. I'm looking forward to, or 2 weeks, we're looking forward to some poop talk. So in the meantime, save up your questions. If you have any questions, comment below. Subscribe so you get more alerts and notifications when we have more content out.
All right, everyone. Have a beautiful weekend. We will talk to you all very soon. Bye.